literally anyone about the process of developing software, and somewhere in the answer, they will hopefully mention the users. User research, user testing, user feedback. The end user is at the heart of everything that we build. However, for many companies, making that conversation with real users actually happen can be a challenge. And when this occurs, we often assume there's a lack of understanding about the importance of user testing and that the problem we need to solve is getting buy-in. While this can occasionally be the case, I have more often found that there's already a strong understanding of how valuable the feedback would be, but the struggle is with organization or resources. It's much more common for me to hear things like, yeah, we would love to do that, but we really just don't have any budget for it right now. People want the chance to sit down with users, but they're not really sure how to make it happen. And because it's not a requirement in order to ship, it gets continually bumped in favor of more urgent tasks. This usually happens in situations where there hasn't been a strong history of design process, or where there's very few or no UX professionals on the team who can really own the task. So if this is all starting to sound very familiar to you, then I have a recommendation. Do it yourself. In an ideal world, yes, this would be the responsibility of a UX designer or a researcher, but for many teams, for various reasons, that situation just isn't a reality. And in this talk, I don't want to discuss that ideal, big budget, perfect world scenario. There are tons of resources out there that already exist for that. I want to talk about how we can still make usability testing possible for startups, for small companies, or for your personal side project that might not have a lot of money or resources or people that you can dedicate to this work. So no matter what your situation is, I am here to assure you that running basic usability tests is something you are completely capable of, and it comes with the bonus of making you a better developer as well. The first major hurdle that we'll need to address before we can even consider anything else is figuring out what we want to test. And no, the whole app is not an option. Usability testing is most effective when it's focused on testing a specific flow, task, or feature. So take a moment and consider what questions you want to be answered about your app. Have you noticed some more support tickets coming in lately? Is there a place where you're not getting the interactions that you anticipated? Have you been getting some negative feedback? Or maybe you're ready to launch something totally new. These are all great jumping off points. You want to choose a specific task or a chain of related tasks that will take the user through the part of the application that you want to test. This flow should have a clear starting and ending point. The ending points don't have to necessarily be the same for every single user, but you should clearly know when a user has satisfied the task requirement. Some examples of flows you could test are onboarding, search and save, exporting an asset, updating a user profile, etc. You want a task that a user can complete in one sitting. There are two main types of tests that you can run. In one option, you'll watch the user move through an established flow totally unguided. The second option is to walk the user through a new flow in a way that's kind of semi-guided. And in both situations, you'll have a chance to see user pain points, misunderstandings, places where your assumptions as a developer diverge from the reality of the user behavior. In the established flow situation, you might say something like, walk me through your process for printing John Doe's time tracking report. Then you'll sit back and observe, let the user narrate and show the way that they complete the task without any interference. It's super interesting because that kind of shows us these quote-unquote desire paths, things that your users need to do for their specific use case that haven't necessarily been built into your app, and all of the loopholes and shortcuts and hacks that they are using to make that thing happen for them anyway. In the new flow situation, on the other hand, there's a little bit more back and forth, and that might sound something like, show me how you would look up flights departing from the Asheville airport on June 1st. Awesome. Can you now talk me through your thought process for how you would choose a flight? Okay, cool. Now, what would you do to book that flight? So in this situation, you're walking the user specifically through each step of the task that you want them to complete, and you're kind of asking questions along the way. This is ideal for testing new features or working with people who have never seen your software before. And it's great because it allows you to see your application through totally fresh eyes. Once you have an idea of what you want to test, then it's time to find some test subjects. Most of the time, you'll want a mix of established users and people who have never seen your app before. But ultimately, that depends on what you're testing. An advanced search feature targeted at super users with vast amounts of data saved, you could probably skip new user testing for that. Whereas an onboarding flow, skip the established users. A new UI design theme, you'll want to mix. In the ideal scenario, obviously, you have budget to throw at this. You can just hire someone to get you that perfect mix of users all lined up for you, all ages and genders and experience levels and abilities. But in this realistic scenario, maybe you have a very limited budget or no budget at all. You can still do this, but it is going to take a little bit more work. Reaching out to your sales and support folks is an excellent place to start for finding established users to test with. Both of those teams can often quickly come up with a handful of potential candidates based on their personal interactions with your users. These tests can often be organized quickly because you already have a pool to draw from, you already have the demographic information, you have an established point of contact, and you know that these users have a vested interest in your brand and your application because they already use it. This is a wonderful place to start, but you really don't want to stop there. To cast a wider net with your established users, try posting open calls on social media or adding banners or modals to your website. Often it can help to kind of sweeten the pot by offering something in exchange. That doesn't have to be money, although it can be, but it could also be things like free trials or discounted rates or company swag. All of those can be really powerful motivators that don't require you to cut a check. And after all, you probably have a closet full of t-shirts and stickers that you've been meaning to clean out anyway, right? So win-win. New users can be a little more challenging because they do absolutely require motivation to participate in something that they otherwise have pretty much no investment in. Those free options can still work here, the trials, the discounts, the t-shirts, so always give it a shot. Friends and family members can be good options here too. You just have to make sure that you're not the one who ends up running the test for your own mom. If you have even a small budget though, something like $20 gift cards or a free catered lunch can do a lot to entice participants. So even if you only have $100, that can still probably get you a handful of folks willing to do a usability test for you. If you have a more moderate budget, investing in a third-party service like a panel agency or a market research recruiter can be super, super valuable here because those folks will help you connect with specific subsets of user types, which means you will get better, more accurate results that more fully reflect your user base. If that's not an option, you can still try to connect with these user groups on your own by reaching out to the places like community centers or organizations that cater to those groups. Often if that's accompanied by a gift of like volunteer hours or public promotion of their cause, that can help as well without needing to spend. Promoted posts and ads on social media sites are also pretty reasonable in terms of cost, and a lot of those will allow you to target really specific demographics that you might otherwise struggle to reach. Ultimately, you want to try and achieve as diverse a group as possible. So consider age, race, gender, disability, orientation, identity, and experience level as you're gathering these users. But also, I do want to say, remember, perfect can be the enemy of good, and any user testing that you're doing is better than none. When you're working with limited resources, the ideal might not be possible for you yet. The long-term goal here is to establish a valuable usability testing program that shows results so that more money and time and resources can be allocated to this down the road when they become available. I want you to think of this as just step one. When your testing group isn't diverse, you do have to take the results with a grain of salt and remember that this might not be reflective of the community. the data is still useful, the conversations are still informative, and the process is still absolutely worth doing. But the results should not be held up as objective truth. While you're reaching out to gauge interest and get those potential candidates locked in for testing, it's time to start nailing down the logistics of the test itself. This is the part where folks often get hung up, because there's a lot of details you might not have considered if you've never done this before. So let's break it down. Ideally, you will want at least 2 people present to run the tests. They don't need to have ever done this before, you just need someone who can be polite and comfortable speaking with users. It's great to have multiple testers so that the workload of proctoring the tests can be divided. When only one person is actually administering the tests, it's a lot of work, and that can really slow down the scheduling. In addition to the person who is giving the test, you likely also want a second silent observer to be present during testing. This person will not participate beyond just watching and taking notes, but that allows the proctor to focus entirely on the user. If you're able to take a video or a screen recording, you can maybe skip that, but it's still really nice to have a second person there to kind of break the session down with afterwards and kind of compare your impressions. If you choose to record the session, that could be as simple and cheap as a microphone and a webcam in the testing room, or it could be as relatively complex as heat mapping or cursor tracking software that gets installed on the testing machine. No matter what you choose, any recording methods need to be disclosed to the user, and their acknowledgement and agreement must be gained before the test can begin. You'll also need to think about how the test is being administered, whether that's in person or remote. Both of these have pros and cons, so there's not necessarily a right answer. An in-person test has the benefit of allowing really close observation of the user, which will allow you to pick up on things like body language or facial expressions that could get lost on camera. It can feel more conversational and more relaxed to test in person. And that also allows you to provide the computer or the device for testing, which gives you a little bit more control and helps eliminate the variables of personal user device configurations. On the flip side, it means you do need a physical space to test in. And if your team works remotely or your office isn't nearby or easily accessible, that can be a challenge. Consider reserving a meeting room at your local library, which is usually free or donation-based, or maybe at a local co-working space, which is usually pretty affordable. In-person testing also means, though, that your users might not have access to their usual assistive devices, so keep in mind that that could limit your accessibility testing. A remote test, on the other hand, has the benefit of flexibility. This allows you to reach more users at times that are more convenient to them, which can help you find more people to test with. It also gives you the benefit of testing in the environment where the user is most likely to be actually using your software, and on the device that they'll be using in real-world situations. However, remote testing also comes with communication and technology challenges. It can sometimes be more difficult to get permission from users to record, especially if they're using work-supplied devices or they're calling in from their corporate office. And if your feature hasn't actually launched yet, then you'll need to figure out the technical aspect of getting the user access. Regardless of which approach you choose, there are some logistics that are universal. If you're planning to run tests during standard work hours, remember, that's a big ask, making users take time away from their job and possibly commute out to you in the middle of the workday. If you're running tests outside of standard work hours, consider the need for childcare. All of these choices could unintentionally bias your results if you don't consider them. When you run tests during the workday at a location that's not easily accessible via public transit, then you're kind of automatically restricting your testing audience to only people who have cars and can easily take time off. If you bring users into your office and you run your tests on a fast desktop computer with a large screen monitor, maybe you're not getting accurate data for an app that's going to be primarily used on tablets by users in a warehouse. So consider the goals of your test and choose a configuration that's going to make the most sense for your needs. After that, after all that, it's time to actually run the test. This part is easier than you'd think. I like to write up an outline so that I have something to reference and make sure that I'm not forgetting anything as I run through all of these steps with the user. You'll start by introducing yourself and thanking the user for their time. If you're offering any kind of compensation or gift, explain when that will be distributed. So like, you'll get the t-shirt and the sticker pack on your way out, or we'll email you the code for your free 2-month subscription. Then you're going to talk them through the goal of the testing. So today we're going to test a new feature in the app, or today you're going to look at a piece of software that you've never seen before. It is crucial to assure the user that this is not testing their personal ability in any way, that there are no wrong answers, and that the only thing being tested here is the software itself. Emphasize that you want their honest feedback even or especially when it's negative. Reassure them that they're not going to hurt anyone's feelings, they're not going to make anyone upset. This part is very important. Then let them know you won't be able to help or guide them while they're completing the tasks, that even if they ask, you really can't tell them the right answer. This can seem kind of mean, but it's really important for you to see how they would solve things without your guidance. Then you're going to ask them to think out loud as much as possible while completing the test. So you'll want to give an example, like, right now I'm looking for the search bar. There it is. Now I'm going to enter the name of my teammate, and you go on. And this feels silly and awkward at first. It just does, and that's totally okay. You can assure them that it will get more natural as they go, and that it's really, really important for you to be able to follow their train of thought as they move through the app. Finally, go ahead and open the floor to any questions from them. You want to take as long as needed in this section to ensure that they feel totally comfortable before moving on. This is also your chance to ask for their permission for anything that you need, like recordings, and to get any verbal or written consent. Once that's all good and you hit the record button and officially start the test, begin with some basic identifying questions that are going to give you context on this data for later. This usually includes things like their name, their age, how long they've been using the software, how long they've been in this industry, so on and so forth. Consider what aspects might impact the data that you're collecting, and as long as it's not too invasive, ask away. When it comes to the task itself, tell the user very clearly and simply what you want them to do. When they get stuck or hung up, which is almost inevitable, ask open-ended questions to help move things along. Don't guide the user towards a specific answer. Don't reach over, take the mouse. Don't give them hints. You just kind of want to say something general, like, what are you looking for on the page right now? Or what do you think will happen next? If they ask for your help, tell them to imagine that they're at home or they're on their own, and ask them what they would do in that situation. And if they really do get to the point where they tell you, like, I would just call support or I would file a ticket, if the test is like at a total standstill, you can prompt them in the right direction. But you really don't want them turning to you for the answer as soon as they feel a little adrift. Seeing how they work through the problem and what they think the answer will be is such valuable data. A little bit of silence is okay, but if it goes on too long, remember to prompt the user to think out loud. So something as simple as, what are you working on? Is usually going to do the trick there. And if a user expresses surprise or disbelief or frustration, one of the best ways you can respond is to ask, what did you expect to happen here? This will tell you about their assumptions and the ways that they have been conditioned to use software, which is, again, such valuable data. Once the task has been completed, ask any follow-up questions that you might have. This is a great opportunity to kind of widen your focus to the more high-level stuff. So their general impressions, their feelings, their emotions when they were using the software. It's also a chance to ask them to share any thoughts or feelings that you might not have asked about specifically. So usually I say something like, beyond what we've just discussed, do you have any observations or thoughts that you want to share? And of course, feel free to drill down as far as needed here to get the specific answers that you need. I also really like to ask the magic wand question here too, which is, if you had a magic wand and you could change any part of what you just experienced, what would it be? This tends to open the floor to like, oh, it would be so cool if I could like blah, blah, blah. And sometimes those are wild cards or things you would never do, but sometimes it's something really cool that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. Finally, check to see if the user has any questions. If you're demoing a new feature, testing a new feature with them, they will almost always ask, when will this be available? So make sure that you have a good answer for that prepared in advance, and don't make any promises that you can't keep. It's also totally fair to say, we don't know yet, but we'll keep you posted, and then thank them again genuinely for their time and end the session. Of course, once you finish conducting the tests, you're not really done. You've got the data now, but for it to be useful for your team, you need to review it and start to form some conclusions. It can feel hard to know what to do with all of this data since so much of it is observational and not necessarily easy to just throw in a spreadsheet. So here's my approach. First, I like to group the data by question or task. You asked all the users the same basic questions and you asked them to perform the same tasks. So that's a good starting point for dividing out the data into parsable chunks. Start by compiling the notes for each user as separated by question. Then you can start to look for patterns. This is where the puzzle kind of starts to come together, right? When multiple users take the same action or they all struggle in the same place. If multiple users follow the same flow without speaking to each other, that's a really strong indication of how your UI is being interpreted. And similarly, if they all fumble or they all make mistakes at the same point, that's a red flag. Then take a look at the numbers. Just because you don't necessarily have much hard data doesn't mean you don't have any. So check out your time to complete tasks. If you have any heat map data, take a look at clicks. See what the numbers have to say in correlation with the experiences that you witnessed. Finally, you're going to collect noteworthy quotes, findings, and data into a one-page document. Other people on your team, and maybe even other teams, are going to want to see the results of your test, but they're not going to read through the notes for every single user. So take your most impactful stuff and put it into a document for quick review and access. My main tip here is to not let one user's struggle or success overshadow the others. Don't rush to change things just because one person didn't understand it. Or, similarly, don't refuse to change things just because one person did it well. It's really easy to look for the users and tests that will confirm our own biases, but that's not actually helpful when it comes to building better software. True objectivity can be hard, which is why it's ideal to involve as many folks as possible in this testing process so that multiple interpretations of the data and the experiences can all be heard and kind of assimilated into your final findings. So that's not too scary, right? Yes, there's lots of parts, but they're all things that can be broken down into smaller, achievable steps and totally something you can do. I really hope you feel empowered and, dare I even say, excited to get out and talk to some users. You will be amazed at how watching a user navigate your app gives you a unique perspective as a developer, one that you will keep with you as you tackle future work and think about future features. It teaches you to resist that urge to make assumptions, and it really helps check your internal biases. Running usability tests is not just great for your software, it's also great for you. And I really hope that this session helps you feel excited and ready to go give it a shot. If you are looking for any of the resources, the slides, or a full transcript of this talk, you can find them at the links here. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at Kathryn Grayson or on my website, kgrayson.com. Again, really wish that I was there with you guys. I hope you're all having a wonderful conference. Thank you guys so much.